Hello, welcome to another SimpleIndex instructional video. Today we're picking up with where we left off in the very first video, just the basic concepts of SimpleIndex. And that one we saw that really just to get a job going, all you needed was an input folder, an output folder, and an index field. And in that case, we were just typing in a value. Now we're going to move into some automation. One of the most used features in SimpleIndex is OCR. That is reading characters off the page to either capture them into the index field and name the file, which is what we're going to look at in this job, kind of the most basic use. But you can also capture information and write it out to a database or write it out to a CSV file, however you need to use it. So it's more than just capturing some labels to name the files, store the files, create folders, that sort of thing. You can also use this data in a much deeper way. But let's take a look at what we have here. I'm going to use one of the sample jobs that comes with SimpleIndex. So let's go to Open Job. So in my case, I'm looking at the F drive. It's probably on your C drive, and there should be a folder called Images, and then in that we have a folder called Samples, and then I'm looking in the Invoice Processing folder, and we're going to read invoices with Zone OCR. That's the one we're playing with today. So let's open that up. You can see it loaded in. We have three fields. We have an account number, an order number, and a company. So let's take a look at how it's doing that. So we're going to go in here to the Job Settings wizard. And just a quick review of what we set up in before. You have your input location. So in this case, it's just defaulting to the location where the SimpleIndex job is stored. And there's a folder there called Input. We're keeping those input files in this job, and we're also going to split any multi-page documents up into individual pages so we can look at every page in a file, not just the first page if there are multi-page files. And image enhancement and PDF processing, we don't need to do any of that with these. These are just standard image files. We're okay there. File output, same thing. We're going out to the output folder. And most people use PDF these days. Let's change this job to PDF. And we're not working with a database, so let's just jump to the indexing and file naming. So you can see we have three fields here, and each one is of the type OCR. So if we go into one and look at how that was set up, we can just do edit right here. First of all, the field type is OCR, as we've said. We're going to go in and we're going to name that field. In this case, it's an account number. We're going to say that it is required, and required means that we can't move on to the next page in all of our files if we haven't put a value in this index field. So if it's left blank, you can't save that index and move on to the next page. And then we also see that the folder box is checked. And that's saying that when we start saving these files out at the end of the job, we want SimpleIndex to make a folder using this account number as the name of that folder. And then how are we doing our matching here? Well, we've got a template going on, and that just means we're going to give it a certain pattern of letters and numbers or even symbols that it's supposed to follow when making the match. Next. So here we've drawn a zone, and we can just do that here. We'll hit Set Zone, and it loads in the first page in that input folder if something's found there, and it's the account number, so we can just drag a box from top left to bottom right, and you can make it oversized because remember we are going to pull that pattern out of there. So if we, let's say we made it this big, we included all of this, it's fine because all it's going to do is match that 8675048. We'll save that, and you can see the coordinates updated there. And then we've got some features. You know, what are we looking for in that box? It's just simple text. That's all we're doing here. There are more advanced OCR options within SimpleIndex. Those are covered in later videos. And then as far as auto-correcting, what do we want to look at? Well, we want to look at every page. We don't want to do any case fixing. That is, do we want to make it all caps, all lowercase? That doesn't matter for what we're doing. And then there are some more advanced autocorrect options too. So if we need to replace characters, if you ran this job and you found that every time it went through it read the zeros as an O, we could tell it to replace 0 with O, and you would do that down here in just a single replace. But there's also multiple characters, so if we ever want to take out things like all of the punctuation marks because we don't want false positive reads on those things, we can do that. Let's go next here. And then we need to give it a template. So we know that our account number is that 8675048 on this document, so we're just going to tell it in the template field that we're looking for those 7 numbers, 7 pound signs. And you can see here's all your different abbreviations for the different characters you can build into a template. And there are quite a few in here. And when we're doing the forward slash, if we need to look for the actual value of a pound sign rather than using it as a substitute for a number, then you use the backslash character, and the same for all of these. So these are what are normally wildcards up here in our earlier options. But if you need to look for those in a literal sense, you just put a backslash in front of it, and then it understands that I'm looking for that. I'm looking for an actual letter A, not any letter as represented by the capital A. And then we do have some that are some regular expressions that are built in. So if you're looking for any type of date, you can do %date%. If you're looking for just one with a 2-digit year, you can do date 2. And all of these you can go through and select. And let's say we wanted a date with a 4-digit year, and I can hit add, and it'll just put it down there for you. Let's back that out of there. All right. And then we've got some options as far as fixed characters. So if we knew that our account number always began with ACT:, for example, I could put that at the beginning of this, and we would use that backslash, as we said, because it's a literal A, colon, space, right? And then I don't want my result to say ACT:, I just want it to have the 7 digits, so I could strip fixed characters in front of the template. Same thing if you're looking for something and the term that helps you figure out where it is on the page comes at the end. So if it was the 7 digits and ACT came after that, we could move that at the other end, strip fixed characters at the end of the template. And then lastly, you have find last matching instance. So if you're starting with a value that's going to be, like if we're looking for a number, and we do this in our invoice jobs, if we're looking for the total on the invoice, rather than trying to tell it to find any number, well, it's going to find the first number, and then it'll stop. If we tell it to find the last matching instance, that's usually the total on any invoice. So if we start at the bottom right and start working our way up, the first thing we find there, i.e. the last number on the page, is typically going to be our total on an invoice. And then let's go back and take this out because we don't want to use that right now. There we are. And there's actually a section here where you can test, and you can see that that sample text actually includes 8675048. So if I want to just check it out, I can do that. When you're working with your own documents, you can type in text information here, or you can actually open a little text file and load all the text from it in there and make sure that your template term is working as you expect. So we'll hit OK on that one. The second value we're looking for on those invoices is an order number. Let's go back and look at our invoices here. So if we click on, there we go. So you can see we have the account number we were talking about, and then we also have the order number here, which is a 6-digit number. So let's go back over to SimpleIndex, and you can see there it was set up exactly the same way as the one I just walked through, but it has a 6-digit template there. And there's also the same thing, there's a zone set in that general area where that order number is going to appear. So we know to just look in that one region of the page and find a 6-digit number. And then last, we're doing another value for the company. Now it's going to work a little differently, so let's edit that one and take a look. Again, it's an OCR field, and we've given it a name. And in this case, we're going to use it as the file name for these output files, and we're working with a dictionary on this one. And I'll explain that in just a couple of clicks here. So we've got a zone drawn for that. We move over here. So here's where that dictionary matching is. So in this case, we've just brought in a text file called companies, and you just point to where it is. So there you go. We've just literally created a TXT file, one company name per line. So it's just going to look everywhere on the page in some cases, or like we've done with this job, it's got a zone. And so it's just going to look in that zone, and it's going to find a match to one of those 9 terms. And whatever match was within there, it'll put in the company index field. Let's close out of there. You can also load these values into your SimpleIndex job, so you can see they're all listed out right there. And then I have the option to store this list within the job. That's what this is saying right here. So I can store the list, and that means I don't have to keep that text file around for it to find. I can just store the list values inside the job, and they're always there. When it's a simple job like this, that's probably the easy way to go. If it is a list of values that you're going to always be updating, there's always new vendors coming in, that sort of thing, it might be preferable to always just have it refer to the text file each time the job runs, and then you can update that text file independently from going into the SimpleIndex job. And we also have an option here to allow only values in the list. So what that's saying is just what the hover text is telling us. That field kind of becomes locked to just those 9 values, and we can't go in and type in a 10th vendor. So use that as needed. And then we have the same thing here where we can do a test of it and see if any of these values are in fact in our sample text, and we can see, you know, tech type interfaces is right there. So let's finish out of this one. And then as far as OCR, since that is the subject of this video, when you're looking at the OCR options, you'll see we have some basic settings right here. So enable full page OCR. So if you need to go through every word on the page to try and find the text you're looking for, you can enable full page OCR. In this case, we're using those 3 zones, so we don't really need that feature in this job. We can turn it off. Really not going to make too much of a difference with this particular job, but you know, if you're working with lots and lots of pages with lots and lots of words on there, sometimes you want to turn off that enable full page OCR and just look in your zones. Also, if you're working with like full text PDFs that already have a text layer in them, and you can determine that by opening the PDF and trying to highlight some text. If you're able to actually highlight individual words and you know it has text already present in that, then you can skip having SimpleIndex perform the OCR because the OCR already exists on a layer in there, and SimpleIndex can work with that. We also have fast OCR, which just defaults to an old royalty-free engine that we developed years ago. It's called Simple OCR, but as you can see there, it says it's less accurate. So sometimes we want to, sometimes we don't. And then we have full page OCR file type. So if you want to save out those that information as a separate file when you do the full page OCR, you can save it as a text file, you can save it as a PDF, and you see the choices there. And then lastly, in the basic features here, and I'm going to turn that back off because we don't need that text file. In the basic features here, we have which engine are we using. It defaults to Professional. Professional is a third-party engine. You'll find it in the OCR edition of SimpleIndex. It's not in the standard edition of it's not in the standard edition of SimpleIndex. And you see that. So if we're using the standard edition, we can also choose the standard OCR engine, or even when you're using the full paid OCR edition, you can still choose standard, which is the again another royalty-free engine, Tesseract, which is a very capable engine and often works for most jobs. Then we have the Simple OCR one we talked about, which is also the same as ticking that fast OCR button up there. And then SimpleIndex also does have some integration with Amazon Web Services Textract capability, so it will send the information up to the cloud if we choose. Now, these 3 options are only available in the professional version of SimpleIndex, but it will take an image of the document that we're working with, send it up to Amazon's Textract service in the cloud, get the results back, and use that to fill in the index fields. And it can even work with, as you see there, forms and invoices, so you can do more sophisticated things using that AWS engine than just using the standard or the professional engines, because it looks for some formatting on the page. It knows what a traditional invoice looks like and can capture data off of that. Same thing with forms. You can tell it which keywords on the page you're looking for, a name, an address, city, state, zip, all those things, and it'll find the corresponding term that goes with that keyword on the page. That's what Forms does. Forms is covered in another video. All the AWS stuff is covered in a separate video. And that's what we're going to look at here. We're not going to move into the advanced OCR settings. Those are, again, not really within the structure of this video. And the other settings in here, barcode recognition, we're not doing. We don't really need to worry about our logs in this case. And so we can really just go on down here to complete and save settings. And we'll hit finish. And it's going to ask if we want to save that job file and exit. Well, yes, we do. So it'll save those changes that we made, update it, and then returns us back to the main screen. So let's take a look at what this job looks like when it's running. So first, as always, it copies all the files from the input folder to a temp location where it's working on them. And then you can see here, in just a few seconds, it's come back with the results for every page. So we can see that it found the account number right there. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Maybe not quite that much. There we go. So you can see we found the account number, we found the order number, we found the business. And again, these two were just doing a simple template match within the zone. And you remember I drew that zone oversized, but it just pulled back the 7 digits that were my template. And then order number, and then it looked at that list to find a match for tech type interfaces. So if we're happy with that, we can either hit the Enter key or hit Save Index. Move on to the next one, and you can see it's done the same thing here. Account number, order number, and the business, all matching either a template or some value in the list. And we can just move on through. We can also go to the grid, which I find very handy. So you can see at a glance that everything got a value. The two red ones are where there was a blank page. Let me just click on that and I'll show you. So there we go. That page was deleted because it was blank. So it just highlights them in red in the grid. But you can see everything did get a value, except down here we do have one didn't come in. And this is why we have the verification step. You can run these jobs in a fully autonomous way where it just goes through and finds everything and saves out. But the verification is awfully nice for situations like this. And we didn't get that 3784569. Let's look at our coordinates here. Yeah, this page is shifted ever so slightly, and so my zone wasn't quite tall enough to do it. So I could go back and fix the zone, or in this case, since it's just the one page, I'll just come over here and key it in. And you can see as I'm typing, it's red until it matches that template. So until I get to the 7th digit, and then it turns blue, just indicating that we now have a match, but we haven't stored that value yet. So we're good there. And then I just want to make sure I hit Save Index to actually store that value. And then I'm on the last page now. One more Save Index. And as always, it says, okay, everything's got an index. Do we want to release the batch? We sure do. And so it's going to go and export the files and move them into that output location. And this job's actually opening that output location for us. And you can see it did exactly what we said. We took the account number and we made it the folder level. And then if we go in here, we see that we use the other two values, the order number and the company name, as the file name. So if you're ever wanting to go back and look for these in your file system up on a server somewhere, they're filed away in a very easy way to find. And you can substitute, you can mix and match any of these. You can look for other values on the page. Just remember that OCR is probably one of the most powerful features in SimpleIndex. And so it can be used to do very basic things like what we're talking about right here, with just capturing a few values for simply naming some files for later reference. But you can also collect data off of the forms as well, like we were talking about with the invoice example. So if we needed to capture a total and a date and that sort of thing, just so we can go back and find these in a database, we could write those values out to a database and we could search for that information in another system entirely. And then we were able to pull up that invoice and see, okay, yeah, it was on this date. Or you could search by the date, for example. Show me all my invoices from April 15th today. So I hope this has proved useful. As always, we thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.